Hi, and welcome to All Things Cozy with Matt.
And Gillian.
We are a bi weekly podcast about everything that is warm, soft, and comforting. This week, we're traveling back to the mid 90s to revisit a book series that had America simmering with adoration Chicken Soup for the Soul. We'll ladle up all the nostalgia behind what made this phenomenon take off heart, comfort, and homespun inspiration. Then we'll dive into two handpicked installments and decide whether Chicken Soup for the Soul deserves a reheat. But before we stir the pot of this discussion, let's catch up on the latest news. That's right, it's Cozy in the News. Today's top item in soup news has us feeling a bit blue. MSN's Adam Bloodworth reports that you can now enjoy a cocktail based on the disastrous blue soup Bridget Jones cooked up in Bridget Jones's Diary at her actual London flat in the film. In honor of the latest installment of the Bridget Jones film series, and as a bit of synergistic marketing for themselves, the Thai restaurant that occupies the lower floor of the flat has added Bridget's Blue Soup cocktail to their menu. A concoction that includes coco kanu, coconut white rum, absolute vodka, butterfly pea gin, coconut syrup, fresh lime, and coconut cream. Well, Bridget herself would surely prefer to sip on this blue mixture, which has butterfly pea gin to thank for its hue, and not the act of leaving blue string in boiling water. It is far less effective at bonding one with a certain Mark Darcy than Bridget's botched batch of potato leek soup.
I actually watched this movie last night, so it's perfect timing.
Yeah, what did you think about the new movie, Bridget Jones, Mad About the Boy?
I cried multiple times.
Me too. I cried 3 times.
So much. Jay looks over and she goes, "You're crying?" Like, yes, it's just so emotional. I was expecting it to be more of a fun romp. And spoiler alert, I think we're just spoilers here. There's a really lovely scene with her younger love interest in the summer. And he arrives at a party and he takes off his shirt. He's in a pool and they're dancing under the moonlight. So there is a lot of romping to be done. But I think more of the movie was focused on her healing from the trauma of losing Darcy.
Yes. And you're not giving anything away because all of this is in the trailer. Don't worry about that.
Good.
Listeners, Mark Darcy has passed away. This is revealed in the trailer for the new movie. And she's finding love again in this context of being a single mother and rediscovering her work. I loved the movie. There really has never been a Bridget Jones I didn't like, and that trend continued. I highly recommend watching it. I picked it as one of my coziest films of 2025. And proud to say that this one did not disappoint.
No, it delivered. And I wanted the blue drink that she was sipping on with her friends.
You're right. That was a callback in the movie that also connects to this. It's a cute little tie-in, but considering we're talking about soup today, I thought it was only appropriate to bring it back to that. And I just wanted an excuse to talk about Bridget Jones' Mad About the Boy, which I thought was a really strong and final, right, entry in the installment. I think that's the last adaptation because I believe that was the end of her story. But you never know in Hollywood.
Yeah, never say never.
If it's a success, they're going to still make another one. So we could have a geriatric Bridget Jones movie. I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah, I'm mad about the grandbaby or something. But I love the way it ended. So I'd be happy, honestly, if it did end there. And I also love seeing Hugh Grant reprise his role. I think he just hits in everything that he's in, for at least for me.
He really does. He delivers every single time. He is the perpetual, lovable cad.
Perfect cad. Oh, and one last thing. I loved in the credits, they were showing old photos from stills from the previous movies. And that made me emotional too. I was like, oh, they look like little babies there.
When I was revisiting this clip from the movie to kind of refresh my memory of how this blue soup scene went down, I was shocked by how young everyone was.
I know. Yeah. Hugh had floppy hair still.
Yeah.
I'm sure the same thing if we're looking back at photos of ourselves.
No, of course. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, what's funny to think too, when I watched Bridget Jones's Diary, how adult they all seemed.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
now I look at them and those characters are younger than I am right now.
Yeah. They're babies.
Yes. To continue our news, we're still going to be in the UK. So, Gillian, what is your news item direct from Britain?
Matt, Peppa Pig's voice might send a chill down every parent's spine, but for kids around the world, she's a cozy icon. So it's only apt to reshare the news on this show that Peppa's going to be a big sister ×2. Yes, that's true. Peppa's mom, Mummy Pig,
Mummy Pig, if this were like a property that was targeted for little boys, it'd be a totally different show. It would be about like an ancient Egyptian pig that was mummified and is having adventures. But
Right.
no, Mummy Pig being Peppa's mom.
Yeah, Peppa's mom, Mummy Pig, is pregnant. And the coziest part about it all, Mummy Pig gave an exclusive live interview to Good Morning Britain's Richard Arnold. The interview felt very realistic and it had a natural, fun flow to it, and it was pretty adorable, even if Peppa interrupted her mom's announcement, which isn't helping her beat the she's rude allegations. And if you're not familiar, there's like a billion articles. Parents are really upset how Peppa's kind of has a bratty or sassy attitude, but her name's not Mary or Marilyn or something. It's Peppa. She has a pep, so she's a little sassy. Nonetheless, The Littlest Pig is due in the summer, marking the show's biggest change since its premiere in 2004. And I remember back in the day when Dee Dee on Rugrats was pregnant with Dill. I remember being so excited as a kid. So I think it's cozy to imagine how exciting this is for longtime viewers of the show or little kids.
Yeah, people who've been watching it for 20 years.
Tuning in
They can't
to
wait
see the finale.
for the announcement. Yeah. It probably is going to make it fresh for a new generation because at this point we've had, a couple of generations grow up watching Peppa Pig.
Yeah, and it was just wild because I was scrolling through the reels because I'm an elder millennial and that's where I'm at. And so I happened to see this and I was like, why is this, pig talking to this British news anchor? And by the end of it, I was like, wow, I just watched a full announcement from Mummy the Pig. Like it just sucked you in and it was really cute, I thought.
That's very adorable.
Yeah.
And we do have Peppa Pig to thank for Tanya's outfits in White Lotus season 2.
I guess I'm not familiar with her wardrobe.
Did you watch White Lotus?
I know I have, but I don't know. I guess I don't remember that reference.
Oh, that's just a joke because remember the hotel manager is taking a photo of Tanya, who's played by Jennifer Coolidge, out by a fountain, and she's all dressed head to toe in pink.
Oh,
And
okay.
she asked her, "Who do I look like?" expecting her to say an Italian actress, and she goes, "Peppa Pig."
Yes, it's kind of coming back to me now.
I'm just saying she's had quite a cultural impact,
Yes,
and so
yes, absolutely.
here we are continuing with more pigs from Mummy Pig.
Yeah.
She's got a full sty on her hands at this point.
Well, I was gonna say, Mummy the Pig had a little roll in the hay.
Now that our brains are full of news, I think it's time that we satiate our sentimental cravings with a little chicken soup for the soul. I'm going to hand it over to Gillian, who has some of the background behind this iconic book series.
Yes. In 2025, Chicken Soup for the Soul might seem hokey, overplayed, or even a bit insincere. But there's no denying its place as one of the most iconic series of the last 32 years, with over 275 installments and more than 110 million copies sold across the US and Canada. The story behind Chicken Soup for the Soul is, in itself, a feel-good tale. It all started in 1993 when motivational speakers Jack Canfield and Mark Victor Hansen decided to compile 101 inspirational stories from people they had met over the years. They'd share these heartwarming anecdotes at their talks, so why not put them in a book? The response was overwhelming, and the publication took off, spawning spin-offs covering topics from Christmas and pets to children, and even subjects like dentistry and American Idol. With something for just about everyone, it's easy to see why the concept has endured for so long. At its core, though, the magnetic draw of Chicken Soup for the Soul lies in the real people whose stories fill its pages. Submissions are welcome from anyone with a powerful tale to share, with only one requirement: that it comes from the heart and has the power to stir genuine emotion. Chicken Soup for the Soul is still going strong, both printing books and accepting new submissions. In fact, there's a recent call for cat stories, as the series publishes a cat-themed book every 18 months due to its immense popularity. If the constant stream of new books isn't enough for you, you can revisit the Chicken Soup for the Soul TV anthology, which aired from 1999 to 2000 and featured familiar faces like Shelley Long and Gary Cole. Or if you're looking for pet products, the brand even sells food for dogs and cats through major retailers. Of course, there's a lot more to say about the series, which dominated such a pivotal time in our lives. But we don't want the soup to get cold, so let's grab a spoon and get into it. So Matt, kicking it off, what are your early memories of Chicken Soup for the Soul? How were you introduced? How old you were? Do you remember?
First of all, I want to give you credit for what an amazing introduction to this
Oh,
book series.
thank you.
Some really wonderful puns, and I learned a lot. I really forgot or didn't know that there was a TV show that was about Chicken Soup for the Soul, or that they had dog and cat food, so a lot of good context. Yeah, so Chicken Soup for the Soul books were ubiquitous in the 90s. I think for my 13th birthday or something, I was given a chicken soup for the teenage soul. And I remember having chicken soup for the cat and dog lover soul on my shelf. If you've never picked up a chicken soup for the soul book, the short stories in these anthologies are often extremely short.
Mhm.
So short that you can read some of them in under a minute. So in those days before smartphones, to any of our young listeners, and you just needed something to do because you were waiting for your mom to finish getting ready because you were going to a family event, and I'm sitting in my jacket ready to go outside, and I'm just going to pick up Chicken Soup for the Soul and read like two quick stories while she gathers her keys to get out. That would be kind of how I would often read this book. You pick it up and just read a little bit at a time. It's similar to any kind of coffee table book where you just dive in, you get a little bit of nourishment from its inspiring passages, and then you move on. And so my memories of the book are that you would find them laying around doctors' offices, like the
Mhm.
dentist, and they would often be in school libraries or like counselor waiting rooms were a popular place for these sorts of books to be found in because they did offer so much comfort to people who were going through tough times and they just fit into those contexts. I do think that these books had a really interesting place in the pop culture landscape as being popular literature in a time when folks were still looking for those little micro doses of reading as a way to pass the time that has now been replaced with technology.
Yeah, I think you bring up a really great point because that's how I read this book. And not to jump into the reread too much, but I was just reading a story, putting it down, doing something else, and picking it back up, almost like a coffee table book. And so your memory, I think, is really spot on of it being in waiting rooms and whatnot. For me, I don't remember how I was introduced. I'm sure I spotted it in everywhere I was, just like you. But I had this really distinct, clear memory of reading one of the installments on my dark green couch in my childhood house in our den. And I don't know why it stands out, but it's almost like I'm watching myself reading the book. I can still see myself there clear as day, and I don't know why, but I'm thinking probably it was just a way for me to experience emotions or complicated things that as a younger kid I probably had no other window into. So I bet it was captivating for that reason, and maybe that's why it stands out. Maybe there's a particularly emotional story that I read, and that's why I have that clear picture in my mind. But I think, yeah, it's one of the first things that I read that wasn't something I got at the Scholastic Book Fair.
You're spot on that, especially as a young person reading these books, they were sometimes your first introduction to more challenging life experiences that older people are sharing in their stories. And usually in a way that they overcome, or they're just sharing how they were able to be resilient in the face of challenges. I could see maybe it being a moment where you felt very cozy, very
Mhm.
comfortable, and it captured a moment of you coming to a new understanding, but also feeling secure and comfortable on your couch cozily reading. So it might have been those confluence of things that created this sort of snapshot. I'm always fascinated by those particular childhood memories of like a snapshot image that is so clear.
Yeah, absolutely.
We all have them. And it's funny sometimes what they are. They're not always the most important thing. You don't look at them and think, well, this is going to be something I'm going to remember for the rest of my life. And then it turns out it really is. It's the randomest stuff sometimes.
Yeah, I want science to explore that because I'm right there with you. Most of my snapshots are so random. Like, what does this mean? What is the larger meaning here? But you also touched on a lot of reasons for this series being cozy. You mentioned the love and the trauma and the healing and the complicated emotions. Is there anything else that makes this series super cozy for you?
Yeah, I think in cataloging all of those experiences of love, kindness, grief, loss, joy, this series offers the reassurance that you're not alone, that someone somewhere has experienced something similar to what you're feeling. And I think when the stories are at their best, they can restore some faith in humanity. And this occurred to me while I was rereading Chicken Soup for the Teenage Soul for the show, that they can be really empathy building, going back to your point about getting a glimpse into these emotions and experiences that at that time you had not personally experienced. You get put in the shoes of people who are different, who have different life experiences, who have different challenges. And I think that they can be like really great ways for people to understand the kinds of problems other people are experiencing. For example, I think that book was probably my first real exposure to people who are struggling with eating disorders or things like that, things that I did not personally experience, but I got a greater understanding of those struggles through personal accounts in books like these. So, reading in general is empathy building, but these really do offer such a diverse range of perspectives that I think it's almost like a deluge of empathy when you get to experience these and over time mull on them and understand all the different challenges people face in life that may be invisible to you day to day.
Yeah, you hit on something that I was thinking really well. As an adult, being able to relate to the stories, I think obviously has a lot more poignancy than when you're reading it as a kid because you can't really understand the complexity of what they're going through or you see it from a different perspective and lens. It's also a form of self-care rereading this book. I was laughing, I was feeling a lot of different emotions. I was feeling really sad at a lot of points, but it was just nice to kind of lose yourself in the fundamentals of storytelling because I think these stories are actually pretty well written. And I know Chicken Soup for the Soul gets a lot of flack sometimes for being overwrought and, anyone can submit. But I think sometimes what we lose about what writing or good writing is, it's really boils down do you have a good story to tell? And it's not necessarily about your voice. It's just that if you have something that is worthy of sharing, whether it's you just thinking that or other people can relate on a bigger scale. So that was a nice reminder rereading this book and why it's cozy for me is just whether the story was really short or if it was a little bit longer, there's just those basic elements of how to tell a story was really present in my reread.
Definitely. It actually is almost like a crash course in personal narrative writing.
Mhm.
I won't say that every installment in these books gets that right. And there's a real wide range of quality
Yes, wide
in
range.
the entries, like really huge. But I find that also charming because it shows the different places they got their stuff from, right? It's not gonna all come from a single source. It's not like they're just like taking a Reader's Digest and picking out their favorite entries. Some of them are coming from established authors, some of them are submitted by readers. And so it becomes a really cool amalgamation of different types of people and how they recall their experiences and the way that they present their lives.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head with it being a wide range. And it is sweet to see because I'm sure a lot of those folks, maybe it's their first thing they've ever submitted. And it really is a confidence builder, especially the book that I read. And we'll jump into our reheats next. But book that I read, I think was from a lot of older women or older folks because they were talking about having their own kids or being grandmas. And so it's nice to, I think, for them to flex those creative muscles. And this allows that opportunity. So on the topic of a reheat, which installment did you choose, Matt?
So, like I mentioned earlier, I picked Chicken Soup for the Teenage Soul, which was originally published in 1997. And I chose it because I remember it being a comfort to me as a teenager. And I was curious to revisit it as an adult to gather any clues as to how it might have shaped my identity or my values. I'll cut to the chase and say, no such luck. Like real chicken soup, you don't remember any outstanding high notes of flavor, but the general feeling of warmth and comfort it provides. So I was a little bit optimistic and hoping maybe through the fog of memory, some of these stories would pierce through and I would remember, oh, yeah, there's that. Or I would read something and say, oh, that's probably why I might have this feeling or value. No, I think it didn't get that deep. But nonetheless, like that feeling of comfort did continue in the reheat, as you say. And I read the 25th anniversary edition.
Oh,
Like I mentioned, it was originally published in 1997. And in the new version, they advertised this book as, quote, helping today's teens be the happiest, best version of themselves, end quote. And I think that's such a funny way of putting it. The happiest version of themselves in a volume that contains some extremely dark stories about death, bullying, eating disorders, and
oh
suicide.
my God.
That really, to me, does not sell the series for what it really provides. And they added in this 25th anniversary edition 25 new stories, mostly written by actual teenagers or recent teenagers like college students. But I do think, especially those stories that are from the perspective of teenagers, they offer so much honesty and bluntness when they address these topics that makes it a powerful read for other people in that age range. And that is an age when you want more independence and when you're able to handle and understand more difficulties and the types of pain people experience in life. But also, you might lack the experience, as you mentioned earlier, the context, and sometimes even like the community, right, needed to endure those experiences. And so I think there's an element of being seen and not being alone that this collection truly offers at a time in life when you feel often very isolated and alone, or like you're the only person in the world who can feel this.
Mhm.
But stories like the ones you find in this book reassure you that you are not the first person to have that problem and that you can overcome it. I think that's where the chicken soup element comes in. And in a way that returns to what inspired the original Chicken Soup for the Soul book. I was watching an interview with the author Jack Canfield, who you mentioned earlier was one of the founding authors of Chicken Soup for the Soul. And he realized when he was a high school teacher that high schoolers didn't believe in themselves. And he saw that they needed to build their self esteem. So he wrote 100 Ways to Enhance Self Esteem in the Classroom, which led to those speaking engagements, which led to going back to where you picked it up, where he got
I
the
didn't know
offer
that.
to start writing that series. And I think this particular installment really does work on the idea of trying to build up the self esteem of young people and really see that they can be agents of change themselves, that they can have the autonomy to improve their lives and build their identity at a time when they're actively in the process of building their identity and planning their future. So, like I said, I picked up the newer 25th anniversary edition, and it's broken down into a few categories. So, there's relationships, friendship, family, love and kindness, learning, tough stuff, making a difference and going for it. In general, I kind of found the different sections to be sort of nonsensical in that there was so much crossover for them that
So much.
I would have reorganized some of these as an editor. There were some really wonderful friendship chapters in love and kindness. I would have put that in friendship. And friendship, weirdly, for me was the most disappointing section because it was full of platitudes. And this could be just my vantage point where I am right now. But as an adult reading the stories written by teenagers, while I think it's awesome to have that firsthand account, I did find that some of them fell into that sort of platitudinous place of echoing sentiments that didn't necessarily come from a lived experience because they're too young. They haven't had that moment yet. They haven't really necessarily even seen the impact of some of these things on their lives. Whereas the ones that were written from a retrospective, like an adult, they didn't have that immediacy. They were able to put what they lived through in the context of more life. And I thought as a teenager, I would find more value in those stories from people who have survived those hard moments as
Right.
teenagers. That's not to say that there weren't some really wonderful stories written by the young people in this book. There definitely are those stories, but I preferred the ones that were written with a little bit more distance because I thought that they came away as more heartwarming and inspiring because you could see the impact of that choice or the things that happened to them into their adulthood and was more reassuring, I think, for people in that position to see I can survive this, right? I can get through these tough moments when you're a teen. When I'm thinking about stories in the collection that really stood out to me, one was Tigress, which was about putting an old cat to sleep. And I thought that story is chicken soup for the soul at its best. It's simple and powerful without being preachy. This boy brings in his cat. She's old, she's sick, she has cancer. And the vet says, you know, you have some options. You can bring her home. She can deteriorate from where she is. It might be painful for her. We can put her to sleep now. We know that's a tough decision. He talks to his dad. He decides that it's time for her to be put to sleep. She's in a lot of pain. He's noticing that. And so he has this moment of being in the room with the cat and the experience of one of the bigger gifts we can give to things that we love in our life is to take their pain. He's releasing the cat from pain and he has to now experience the pain of losing the cat. I thought like that sentiment was so powerful and such a mind shift. I think it can be really transformative for a young person to think about that. I also really loved some of the ones that were written by actors. My TV and film watching love jumped out on that one, but AJ Langer, who was an actor on My So-Called Life, wrote one of the stories, and it was a good story, but actually I love the quotes that they added from My So-Called Life, and I was like, "Wow, the script writing for that show is really powerful." This is what the quote was. "There's the people you've known forever who know you in this way that other people can't because they've seen you change. They've let you change." And it was a story about how in her friendships, she moved on from her friends that were always there for her into trying to find like the new hot crowd of people, the popular group, right? When the real friendship and love were from people who were okay with letting you change. And it's about like how she was able to return to them and they still accepted her in a way that like newer friends, like once she no longer represented the kind of person that they thought she was, they dropped her But the people that she knew since kindergarten always accepted that, yeah, I've known you for a long time. You've always gone through different evolutions. I think that's true of a lot of like long-term true friendships. You see each other change over time and you let that happen. You don't think of it as a betrayal. So I thought those were two of the standout stories in the collection. Oh, there is one final one I want to talk
Oh,
about,
yeah.
which is in the Going For It section. There was The Boy Who Talked with Dolphins. It's an excerpt from Reader's Digest. I also, as a kid, loved Reader's Digest. I read my grandma's Reader's
It's
Digest.
adorable.
Anyway, it's about a young man with disabilities who finds his calling with working with dolphins. And it picks up at the Northridge earthquake is happening. And the dolphins that are at Six Flags Magic Mountain, their tank is damaged and it's losing water. And he helps transport those dolphins to Knott's Berry Farm. And it's so funny because I was looking for like, okay, what stories feel like they're just artifacts of the time that they were written? And I felt like as much as the story had really interesting information about this young person with disabilities, but also the strangeness in not batting an eye at having these animals in captivity and are they really that happy? This was pre Blackfish, right? Where we really all got to see through the story of Tilikum just how stressful captivity is for these animals and just not good for them. But anyway, despite that, still like an interesting story nonetheless. You don't think about like when you read about disasters like that, who's taking care of the dolphins when they're in closure, like literally cracks apart in an earthquake. So yeah, so I really enjoyed my time revisiting this series. And I thought even as an adult, there were still some things to take away from it.
Yeah, I think what you said was the similar experience. The ones that stood out were the most simplest ones that also had a powerful message at the same time. But those other stories that you just highlighted, the ones that provided new information, so there are some events that obviously I didn't know happened in the 90s when I was growing up. And so the book that I read also had some standouts just in terms of like, whoa, that happened. And wow, this person overcame this incredible event that occurred and I didn't even know about it. So, very similar experience to what I had. The ones that you highlighted, I would also have been interested in reading. I think everyone can take away something from that book, even if they aren't a teenager. And absolutely, it's best to write about things when you have distance from it. For me, I avoided humans. I was going to try Chicken Soup for the Woman's Soul, but as one reviewer aptly put it, they didn't have time for the glorification of sacrifice. And I also don't have time for any more imaginary arguments in my head or to be angry. So I was like, I'm just going to find something that's neutral enough for me to assess. So I wouldn't be assessing how it stood up over the test of time. Because I think if I went
Yeah.
into a gender situation, I might be a little bit
Oh,
aggravated.
absolutely. And even in the Teenage Soul book, there are certain sort of messages being sent to teenagers. And obviously, the one that I read has been updated. I think a lot of the worst offenders were removed and replaced with even stories about the COVID-19 lockdown. And it gets
Oh, okay.
really fresh.
Updated.
And they really made an effort to make sure that lots of different perspectives and backgrounds are represented in the book that might not have had that kind of diversity the first go around. So, hats off to the editors for making sure that more perspectives were included in the 25th anniversary edition.
Yeah, on the topic of editing too, this is like a little bit off topic, but I agree with you. I wish someone had edited the chapters because mine was also the same thing. I think it should be less chapters or less sections. Maybe just the top
Yeah,
three.
there doesn't need to be all this breakdown of it.
No.
Like, I think they broke it down a little too micro because there was so much crossover that it felt like sometimes it didn't really add anything to break it down in such micro little categories.
No.
But yeah, I completely understand wanting to just go for something a little more neutral. I'm really curious to hear how the Cats book stood up. Did it have you purring with adoration or were you hissing?
It was a mix for sure. So I read Chicken Soup for the Cat Lover Soul, stories of feline affection, mystery, and charm. And now reading that title, I don't know if I would say there's a lot of mystery in it, but I chose this installment because obviously I love cats, and I saw an adorable review from this man who bought the book for his wife, and he said that she reads everything about cats and follows a number of them on Facebook, including the latest Virginia celebrity Patches. So once we end this episode, I'm going to be looking up Patches, the Virginia celebrity. So that was really heartwarming. Like, hey, I'll go with this. It's also broken down into a ton of nonsensical sections on love, celebrating the bond, a furry RX, categorically wonderful, cats as teachers, farewell, my love, rescue me, and one of the family. So I was a little bit scared to read this at the same time as I was excited because I knew there was gonna be cats dying in it, and there were, but I would say for the most part, it was a lot about healing, so cats healing hearts, helping them heal his physical ailments, and also healing their trauma, and of course, the cats taught as many lessons as the humans, so I thought that was an interesting mix, whether it was someone learning something on their own or the cat in their own actions and what the cat did influencing what the author took away. And there was a fun mix. So it wasn't all just intense topics. There was one story where this father in a family is really against getting a cat, but they have to bring it in, otherwise it will be killed at the shelter, and then over time, the cat does all these adorable things, and the father says at the end, "That's my cat, we can't adopt it to another home."
The dads always come around.
They always do. So there's cute stories like that, but for me, the stories that stood out were the more heavyweights. So, for example, there was one called Music Loving Tabby, and it was this woman who I believe was in the summer of 1997, lost her young adult son who was a musician in a car accident. And so she took in his beloved cat, and the cat was really standoffish. And so they're trying all these different things, and they decided one day to, remember the son, put on one of his older CDs of him playing music, and then the cat just came alive and was coming up to them and rubbing up against them and just seemed very animated. And through that, the parents were able to open themselves up to also the healing and confronting the loss of their son and just diving into celebrating his life. And they talked about how they would play music all the time now, like, with the cat being there, and it's just really wonderful way to honor, remember their son. There was My Mother's Cat, which was told from the perspective of an older woman who her mom died, I think 2 weeks after she was born, and the mom was younger, she was 19, and she had this cat called Paprika, who the mom just adored. And so the grandparents took in the cat and their granddaughter, and it took place during World War II. And so this cat was in the bunker with her, really just saw her through these hard times. And so the lesson in that was she was so attached to this cat because of the connection to the mother she never knew. And obviously the mom was hugging the cat at one point. So she felt like she was almost hugging her mom through the cat. So that's a really powerful connection to be made. So when the cat eventually died, because it was already 9 by the time she was born, she was just so heartbroken. She's like, I can never love another cat again. And when they are able to immigrate to America, their first Christmas, the grandparents get her a new cat. And so immediately when she has this cat, tears are flowing, and she's able to kind of release her mother and also open up her heart again. So I thought that was very memorable, and I liked those themes. And then the last one I'll mention is called The Uncles. And that was a cute story about this woman who had a group of stray cats in her yard. One was named Curly, I forgot the other one's name. And there's these 2 older male cats, and they really hated each other. So when a pregnant stray came into the mix, they were both really protective of this stray mama cat. And there's one of the kittens got sick. And so even though they hated each other, the uncles, the 2 older cat males, came together to help the little kitten. So they were side by side working to revive the kitten and just take care of it. And then eventually when the kittens grew up, there wasn't enough room under the shed where they were living. So one of the uncles stood outside of the shed and just was like hanging out in the rain. The owner, not the owner, I guess the guardian of these cats tried to encourage that cat to come inside, but it was just keeping watch. But it also let his nemesis and the kittens and the mama stay under the shed. And so he was open in the rain, all the elements. And so he eventually died. But it's a story about sacrifice. And I thought that was really interesting. So those were the ones I liked. There was one I didn't really like, and that was a story about this teenager. It's told from the perspective of her mother. She notices that her daughter is experiencing pretty severe depression, like all the hallmarks of this is really deep into the depression, not feeling down kind of thing. So the mom does the right thing. She does take her to therapy. She is put on medication. So it's not like anti-medication, but they think about getting her a cat. And when she gets the cat, the depression is cured. And so I was thinking, is like, wow, I would really love to hear this story told from the teenager's perspective, because the mother is really glossing over the depression a lot and is also referencing a lot of religious themes and just talking about how the cat, once the cat came into their lives, thank God she's, back to her old self. And, having 2 cats of my own, they do really help lift me up when I'm down, and it is a mood booster, but I don't think they're a cure for depression. I feel she's making those connections, maybe if she wasn't aware of it herself. And there's also a similar story about bullying. The book opens with bullying, and I was like, I don't know if this is gonna be just like this. The story, I don't know if I can continue on. This little girl was relentlessly, horrifically bullied. The worst bullying you could imagine. And one of her teachers encourages her single mom to get her a pet cat, even though they're low on finances. Somehow they can afford to bring a cat into the mix. And then after she gets this cat, all the kids who were horrific to her suddenly have interest in her. Then she grows out to be valedictorian. And like maybe that happened. That one, I was like, is this fanfic or something for people who were like previously bullied? Because it just minimized a lot of pain in some ways. So caution with that. And it does concern me in the 90s if you were a young teenager reading this to just think that problems can be that easily resolved, especially like medical ones like depression or, bullying with a cat. So anyway, that's my long meow about this book. So it was a mixed bag.
Yeah, I mean, the ones you mentioned that sound powerful sound very powerful
Yeah.
and make me want to read this installment. But I totally hear what you're saying about sometimes it feels like these authors, they wanted to shortcut to the inspiring and the everything is great now. They just wanted to get there so badly. They did not really share what you can sense is the reality of the situation. And therefore, those stories end up feeling so hollow as a result of that. And again, going back to the like analysis of personal narrative, these actually are really great resources for people who teach writing
Hmm.
to really look at how people represent their stories and what perspective are they told from. Would it have been better if, maybe that mom, instead of writing that story herself, she asked her daughter to
Yeah.
write it from her perspective, maybe hand it over to the person who experienced it. That being said, I'm moved hearing about those cat stories secondhand, so I can't even imagine, getting to read them from the kitten's mouth. This sounds like very comfort. Did you find that your mood was boosted after reading a story or two?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. It's just such a wide breadth of people and families and different kinds of cats, cats that were just yearning for love and affection, and then others who are a little bit more closed off and seeing how they played an instrumental role in, a person's life. There's also one that's a little bit more darker, happy endings, and it does have a happy ending, but I didn't know this, and this is a trigger warning for everyone. So take a beat, turn it off if you need to. But in 1997 in Iowa, I didn't know this. 7 teenagers broke into a cat shelter and killed 17 cats.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I had no idea that happened either.
I didn't know. Apparently made national news, and it was a huge story back in 1997. And so one of the workers there wrote the story of not about that incident. So don't be alarmed that's in there. It isn't. She just references it, and she taught how they rebuilt from there. And the silver lining was they were able to have stronger anti-animal cruelty laws, and they built a new shelter that was eco-friendly. And because it was a big news story, they had a lot of donors, and they were able to create this beautiful, beautiful sanctuary for all these animals. And she talks about one particular cat from that old shelter moves into the new shelter, and they were passed over for years and years. And it was just like your average cat, didn't have anything special about them per se. And the person who adopted it was blind, and they were able to connect just through the emotion. And so it ended on a really beautiful note. So there were some really serious subjects in there. I bring up that story, even though it's really upsetting, to highlight how you might think this book is about cats. It's a little bit light, or it doesn't touch on deep themes or serious events, because it does. And that was one of my favorite stories, not because of obviously the horrificness of it, but just how you can rebuild after such a horrific loss like that. And just to see how these people really came together for animals, because it's not just about animals healing humans, it's about humans sticking up for animals. And as an animal lover, I thought that was really important and to put out there. So
Yeah, what a horrific event, but also what a shining example of humanity and people coming together and improving after a tragedy.
yeah, definitely. So yeah, I still have some to read. Like I did a pretty big sampling, so I wanted to touch down on every section. Some I left because I didn't really want it to end at the same time. Because it's just nice to pick up, like you reiterated before, just when you're waiting for something or you want to pop in and warm your soul up a little bit. I would definitely pick up another one, maybe in the future. They not relating to women or anything like that.
No. And honestly, it wouldn't be that surprising if maybe one of them found you. because they do tend to just sort of appear sometimes when you
That's
need them.
true. Absolutely.
It's interesting looking at also where the series is right now. Obviously, they have their all-time favorites like Chicken Soup for the Teenage Soul that get just reprinted constantly and are big pillars in their line. But I was looking at some of their more recent releases, and it's an interesting assortment of titles because it's clear what's selling for them and what's getting therefore reproduced because there's so much more pet content than anything else, or there's a lot of Christmas. It's like Christmas and pets and miracles. But in general, it's crazy how much this series has endured. And here we are, over 30 years, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Into the series existing, and it's still going strong.
And I have to tip my spoon to you because you came up with this idea for the episode. And, I haven't really touched down on the series, obviously, in a long time. So I was unsure how I would feel about it. But I'm really glad that we did it because it's such an iconic moment of the 90s and beyond, to your point of it going on for 30 plus years. And it does warm the soul, not to,
Yeah.
yeah, be under a
And if we're
hokey
talking
hand.
about all things cozy, we got to talk about an all-time book series that's incredibly cozy.
Yeah, I can't believe, yeah, we didn't touch on it till now, but bowl tip to you.
Well, Julian, it looks like our bowls are empty. No more soup in there, but our souls are content. Let's keep the good vibes going with a candle review.
Not to pat myself on the back, but I really went above and beyond for this
You
candle.
did. I'm so excited for our listeners to hear about the candle that we are sniffing today.
So, once again, yeah, to give myself too much cred, but I went on eBay and I found the Campbell's Chicken Noodle Soup candle from its partnership with Camp Limited. So, back in 2020, Campbell's and Camp Limited came together to make the chicken noodle soup candle. And it's really legit. It comes in an actual can and it mirrors the same exact packaging that you would see on a Campbell's soup can. The only difference is it has a big snowman on it, and that's because it was inspired by the brand snowman commercial Snow Buddy.
I love that commercial. It's where the boy comes in and he's a snowman, but you don't know that until he starts eating the soup and the snow melts away and it's just a little kid.
Well, apparently, speaking of melting away, it says once the candle is fully burned, a snow buddy will appear to help you remember all of the cozy memories you just made. So I don't know if there's like a little toy in there or if they're just going to tell, like, the spirit of the snow buddy is going to come out. I'm not sure, so I'm a little bit alarmed. But the back of the can is really creative and well done. So the directions say light the candle and wonder if this is a new form of aromatherapy, gather the family for a game night, smile as you stare out a frosted window, skip your chores for the day, experience extreme bouts of joy, feel good. So that's the directions. And then they have smiles per can, 60. So, making light of calories and like making those connections. And then they have on the back the serving size, total fun, 100%, rich room filling fragrance, 100%, creative crafted with love, 100%. And the top notes, savory chicken, a snuggly hug, mid notes, clove, crisp winter air, base notes, buttery crackers, family game night. For me, the base note of buttery crackers is coming up really strong. I won't lie here on this podcast. I'll always be truthful. Almost was going to vomit when I smelled it.
Wow. Is the chicken piece?
It's the buttery piece.
Mm.
It's just, I can't explain. It's like this greasy, buttery smell, not the good kind that you would smell in a diner. I don't know. Maybe it's
It's like a buttery smell of like if you're cooking something, that kind of lingering buttery smell that you kind of just would leave your kitchen
yeah, I would
after you're done.
say it's more like that. But I'm also getting the savory chicken notes. If I step back a little bit from the candle, I can smell that scent of, someone's cooking something good in the kitchen, which
Is
is
it
what I
attracting your
wanted.
cats into the candle?
Yes, absolutely. So my cats know that when, like all animals, like when they open up the can, that's their food. So when I was doing a video of, because I wanted to show everyone how cool it is, it's like a real can and open it up on camera. And Reese's came running over and put her face right in it.
Oh, this is dangerous for animals. Like just gonna attract them to an open flame
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Because the
for the
scent
meat.
too. Yeah. So you're absolutely right. Keep it away from your pet. They didn't even think about it outside the sound, the smell too. So yeah, I think it's really cool. It's a neat collectible. Obviously, once it's done burning, I can just have the can. And maybe there is a snow buddy waiting for me. I don't
I am
know.
dying to know what is underneath that candle. I'm almost gonna just look it up now. Do you want it to be a surprise for yourself at the
No, I want to
bottom?
know.
It looks like another one of the candles that they offered during this promotion was tomato soup and grilled cheese, which maybe that one would have been more up your alley. But I'm glad you went with chicken noodle soup because it's very
Yeah.
appropriate for our episode, despite the fact that it makes you want to vomit.
And you can still buy the grilled cheese and tomato version on
All right, I
Camp.
found it.
Camp.
It's a okay. So Jillian, the snow buddy is a gold trinket of a little snowman that
Oh,
does look
that's
really cute, and I
adorable.
think it can end up being an ornament on your tree.
Okay. Wow, that is so special. Well, Matt, there are still versions available on eBay. There's a lot. Some are really price gouging for this. I saw some upwards in like 70 plus. I, for full disclosure, with shipping and everything, mine was like 40 some odd dollars. So a little bit more on the pricier side, but you're getting that little snow buddy. And if you're a big Campbell soup fan, it's iconic and you can keep it. But if you want the grilled cheese and tomato version, it's still up there. Unfortunately, like I said, eBay for the chicken noodle soup reliefs. Some candle purchases come with a winter warm up guide. And the winter warm up guide is a collection of activities for families to enjoy together, including arts and crafts, recipes, and games. I don't think mine came with it. The eBay package that I got did have it in the original box, but maybe it was open before because I don't think I saw a warm up guide. But so I
They
would
probably
highly
bought it for the warm up guide, and we're like,
recommend.
you can have the candle, we'll have the warm up guide.
Yeah, I would give this a wick up for sure, just because of the amount of creativity and care that it went into releasing this candle. I think it's really special, especially if you're a big Campbell soup fan, and it's a great candle for winter. And I can't wait to meet my snow buddy.
Yeah, and you mentioned this already, but yeah, there's a tomato soup and grilled cheese candle that's currently available. So we'll link that in our show notes too. You can buy it now for $24. Not terrible.
No, oh no, not terrible at all. Yeah, and then get them while they're hot because people on eBay will be ripping you off.
Thank you for finding the chicken soup one for us to talk about today.
Of course,
Always got boots on the ground here at All Things
always.
Cozy. And if you want to support these kinds of candle reconnaissance missions, you can support our show at Patreon. We're at patreon.com/allthingscozy, where you can get goodies like stickers and magnets and even join our All Things Cozy book club. You can also find us on social media channels like Instagram and Facebook at All Things Cozy Podcast and on Blue Sky at All Things Cozy. We hope that you enjoyed your big slurp of cozy soup today with our revisiting of Chicken Soup for the Soul books. Thanks again to Gillian for giving us the history and the background there. We hope you'll have another helping of All Things Cozy by coming back for our next episode. We'll be back in your ears in a couple more weeks. Until next time, stay cozy.